The new waitress froze when she saw her childhood photo on her boss's desk. The rain hammered against the windows like it had something to prove. Hannah clutched the coffee tray tighter, her knuckles going white as she stepped into the elevator that would take her to the top floor, the forbidden territory, where only the boss and his inner circle ever went. Third day on the job, and already she was being summoned. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished steel doors. 23 years old, dark circles under her eyes from pulling double shifts at her old diner gig just last week, hair pulled back in a bun that was already coming loose. She looked exactly like what she was, a girl trying to make rent in San Francisco, which was about as easy as swimming upstream in concrete shoes. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal a hallway that smelled like money, leather, mahogany, and that expensive cologne rich people wore. Hannah's sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as she made her way to the corner office, the one with Robert Miller etched in gold on a plate by the door. She knocked, twice. Soft. "Come in." The voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to make you listen. Hannah pushed the door open and immediately felt smaller. The office was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Bay Bridge, bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes she'd probably never understand, and a desk the size of her entire studio apartment back in the Tenderloin. Robert Miller stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, staring out at the gray sky like he was trying to read something in the clouds. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. Well, the car she used to have before it died last year. "Your coffee, Mr. Miller," Hannah said, her voice coming out smaller than she'd intended. She set the tray down on the mahogany desk, careful not to make a sound. That's when she saw it. A silver picture frame, half hidden behind a stack of contracts and financial reports. The kind of frame you'd keep something precious in, something you looked at when you thought no one was watching. Hannah's hand froze mid-reach. The photo showed a little girl, maybe 5 years old, curly brown hair that caught the light like honey, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to smile even when her mouth didn't. And there, right there on her chin, a dimple, small but unmistakable. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. She knew it because she'd seen it before, in the only photograph she owned from her childhood, a faded Polaroid taken by Sister Margaret at St. Joseph's Home for Children in Reno, Nevada. Hannah had been 5 years old, dirty, barefoot, and completely alone. No memories of where she came from. No idea who her parents were. Just a first name scrawled on a piece of paper pinned to her worn-out dress. Hannah. But the girl in this photo, the dimple, the eyes, even the way her hair curled at the ends, it was identical. Too identical. "You can go." Hannah jumped. She hadn't realized she'd been staring. "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." She practically stumbled over her own feet getting to the door, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What the hell was that? Why did Robert Miller, the Robert Miller, owner of 5 Michelin star restaurants, real estate mogul, the man Forbes called San Francisco's most reclusive billionaire, why did he have a photo of a girl who looked exactly like her childhood self? The door clicked shut behind her, and Hannah leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking. "You okay, honey?" Hannah looked up. Nancy Chen stood there with a bag of chopped vegetables, her weathered face creased with concern. Nancy had been working in the restaurant's kitchen for longer than Hannah had been alive. 25 years, she'd said. She was the only person who'd been genuinely nice to Hannah since she started. "I'm fine," Hannah lied. "Just, Mr. Miller's kind of intimidating." Nancy's expression softened. She glanced at the closed office door, then back at Hannah. "He wasn't always like that, you know, cold, distant." She shifted the bag to her other hip. "You want to know what happened?" Hannah nodded before she could stop herself. Nancy leaned in closer, lowering her voice even though they were alone in the hallway. 18 years ago, Mr. Miller had everything. Beautiful wife. Claire was her name. And a little girl, Lily. Sweetest thing you ever saw. 5 years old. Always singing. Always smiling. Hannah's pulse quickened. "What happened to them?" "Car accident. Highway 101. Just south of the city. March 14th, 2007. Nancy's eyes grew distant, like she was watching it happen all over again. Claire died on impact, but the little girl, she shook her head. Lily disappeared, just vanished. They searched for months. Police, FBI, volunteers combing every inch of the state. Never found a trace. The hallway seemed to tilt. March 14th, 2007. That was exactly 3 days before Hannah had been found wandering alone on the outskirts of Reno, dirty and confused, with no memory of how she got there. He never remarried, Nancy continued. Never moved on. Kept her room exactly the way it was. Every morning, he puts fresh flowers on a little altar he made with her picture. She sighed. Some people say he's been looking for her all this time. Others think he just can't let go of a ghost. Hannah's mouth had gone dry. What did she look like, Lily? Nancy's eyes got that faraway look again. Brown curly hair, pretty eyes. Oh, and she had this cute little dimple right here. She touched her own chin, just like a button. The world stopped spinning. Hannah mumbled something. She wasn't even sure what, and practically ran to the staff bathroom. She locked the door behind her and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Brown curly hair, almond-shaped eyes. And there, on her chin, the dimple she'd always thought made her look childish. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and scrolled to her photos. She kept it in a protected album, the only picture she had of herself as a child. Sister Margaret had given it to her when she turned 18 and aged out of the system. In the photo, 5-year-old Hannah stood in front of St. Joseph's, wearing a donated dress that was 2 sizes too big. Her feet were bare, her hair was a mess, but her face, God, her face, was exactly the same as the girl in Robert Miller's silver frame. Hannah gripped the edge of the sink. This couldn't be happening. This was insane. People didn't just stumble into their long-lost families while serving coffee. That was the kind of thing that happened in movies. Not real life. Not to girls like her who'd spent 18 years wondering if anyone out there even remembered she existed. But what if she wasn't Hannah at all? What if she was Lily? Hannah couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a face. If you squinted hard enough, the streetlight outside cast shadows across her wall, and every time a car passed, the room lit up like someone was taking a picture of her life and finding it wanting. She kept thinking about that photo, about Nancy's words, about the impossible coincidence that was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like destiny knocking on her door with a sledgehammer. By 5 a.m., she gave up on sleep entirely. The San Francisco Public Library opened at 9, but Hannah was already waiting outside at 8:30, clutching a thermos of gas station coffee that tasted like regret. When the doors finally opened, she made a beeline for the computer stations and pulled up the digital archive of old newspapers. Her fingers trembled as she typed, Highway 101 Accident March 2007 Claire Miller. The results loaded. The first headline made her stomach drop. Tragedy on Highway 101. Prominent businessman's wife killed, daughter missing. Hannah clicked. The article was from the San Francisco Chronicle dated March 15th, 2007. There was a photo, a mangled SUV, rescue workers everywhere, the kind of scene that stays with you long after you close your eyes. She forced herself to read. Claire Miller, 32, wife of restaurant mogul Robert Miller, was pronounced dead at the scene after a suspected drunk driver crossed the center line on Highway 101 near San Bruno. The couple's 5-year-old daughter, Lily Ann Miller, was reportedly in the vehicle but has not been located. Authorities have launched a massive search operation. Hannah's vision blurred. She scrolled down, found another article from a week later. Still no sign of missing girl as search enters day 7. And another. From a month after, FBI joins hunt for Lily Miller. Father offers $1 million reward. She kept reading. Article after article, watching the hope fade from the headlines until finally, 6 months later, search for Lily Miller scaled back. Case remains open. Hannah sat back in the plastic chair, her coffee forgotten and cold. March 14th, 2007. That was the day of the accident. March 17th, 2007. That was the day Sister Margaret found her wandering on Route 95, just outside Reno. 3 days later. 3 days that were completely blank in her memory, like someone had taken an eraser to that part of her brain. The sister had called the police, of course. They'd run her through the system, checked missing children reports, tried everything, but little Hannah, if that was even her real name, didn't match anyone. No fingerprints on file, no dental records to compare. The only thing she had was that piece of paper with Hannah written in shaky handwriting that could have belonged to anyone. Eventually, they'd given up. She became a ward of the state, just another lost kid in a system full of them. But what if she was never supposed to be lost at all? Hannah printed out the articles with shaking hands, paying the 25 cents per page that she really couldn't afford. She folded them carefully and stuck them in her backpack, right next to her worn copy of her childhood photo. She made it through her shift at the restaurant on autopilot, took orders, served food, smiled when she was supposed to, but her mind was 1,000 miles away, or more accurately, 18 years away, trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Around 3 p.m., during the lull between lunch and dinner service, she saw him. Robert Miller walked through the dining room like he owned it, which, to be fair, he did. But there was something different about the way he moved today. His eyes swept the room, and when they landed on Hannah, they stopped. Really stopped, like he was seeing something that shouldn't be there. He walked over. Hannah's heart jumped into her throat. Hannah, isn't it? His voice was exactly like it had been in the office. Deep, controlled, but there was something underneath it now. Something that sounded almost like uncertainty. Yes, sir. She gripped her order pad so hard the pen left an indent in her palm. Where did you say you were from? The question hung in the air between them. Hannah could feel the other staff members watching, pretending not to listen while they absolutely were. I didn't, sir, but I'm from Nevada, Reno area. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. You grew up there. In a way. Hannah swallowed hard. I grew up in St. Joseph's Home for Children. It's an orphanage. Been there since I was 5. Robert's jaw tightened. His eyes, gray, like storm clouds over the ocean, searched her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't. Couldn't. 5 years old, he repeated, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. Yes, sir. They found me wandering on the highway. No memory of where I came from. No family. Why was she telling him this? She never talked about this. Not to anyone. They tried to find my parents, but no one ever came looking. Robert's hand gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles went white. When? The word came out rough like gravel. When did they find you? Hannah's pulse was racing now. March 17th, 2007. The color drained from his face. For a moment, she thought he might pass out. Then he took a step back, composing himself with visible effort. I see. He cleared his throat. Get back to work. He turned and walked away, but not before Hannah saw it. The way his hand shook as he reached for the door. The way he paused, just for a second, like he was fighting the urge to turn around. That night, Hannah sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by printed articles and her single childhood photo. She'd been humming without realizing it. A melody she'd known for as long as she could remember. Soft, gentle, sad in a way that made you want to cry without knowing why. It was the only thing she had from before, the only memory that felt real. The words came automatically, like breathing. Fly, fly, little bird, fly home, fly to the nest. The wind may blow. The rain may fall, but you'll find your way back, safe and blessed. She'd always assumed it was something she'd heard on TV or the radio. Kids picked up songs all the time, right? But now, sitting here with all these pieces laid out in front of her, she wondered, what if someone had sung it to her? What if it wasn't just a song, but a lullaby? What if someone had loved her enough to sing her to sleep, night after night, until that love became the only thing her broken memory could hold on to? Hannah pulled out her phone. Her hands were steadier now, like she'd moved past fear into something else. Determination, maybe, or desperation. She wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. She typed into Google, Lily Miller lullaby song. Nothing useful came up. Just the old articles she'd already read, a few conspiracy theory forums wondering what had happened to the missing girl, and a Facebook memorial page that hadn't been updated in 6 years. She tried again. Robert Miller daughter song. Still nothing. But then, on the 3rd page of results, she found something. A A small blog post from a former employee who'd worked at one of Robert's restaurants back in 2006. The post was titled, "Remembering the Good Days." Hannah clicked. Most of it was mundane. Stories about kitchen mishaps, celebrity sightings, the time the sous chef accidentally set his eyebrows on fire. But at the end, there was a paragraph that made Hannah's breath catch. Mr. Miller was different back then. He'd sometimes bring little Lily to the restaurant on weekends, and she'd sit in the kitchen eating cookies while Mrs. Miller worked on the books. Lily was always singing this song about a bird flying home. Mrs. Miller said she made it up one night when Lily couldn't sleep. It was their special song. God, I miss hearing that little voice. The phone slipped from Hannah's hands. She picked it up again, read the words 3 more times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. Their special song, the song Hannah had been singing for 18 years, the one she thought came from nowhere, had been Lily Miller's lullaby. And that meant she wasn't crazy. That meant the impossible might actually be true. 3 days passed before Robert called for her again. Hannah had almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. The look on his face, the way his hand trembled, the raw pain in his eyes when she'd mentioned the date. Maybe she was reading too much into it. Maybe she was just a desperate orphan grasping at straws, seeing connections where there were none. But then Nancy found her during the dinner rush, flour still dusting her apron. "Mr. Miller wants to see you." "Upstairs now." Hannah's stomach dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" Nancy's expression was unreadable. "Just go, honey," and Hannah. She squeezed her shoulder. "Whatever happens up there, you got people looking out for you down here, remember that?" The elevator ride felt longer this time. Hannah watched the numbers climb. 3, 4, 5, each floor taking her closer to something she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or the end of it. The door to Robert's office was already open. He stood by the windows again, but this time he turned when she entered. In the late afternoon light, he looked older than she remembered. Tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long. He'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "Close the door," he said. Hannah did. Her hands were sweating. "Sit." She sat in one of the leather chairs across from his desk, trying not to think about how much it probably cost. Robert didn't sit. Instead, he walked to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured one for himself, drank it in a single swallow, then poured another. "I don't normally do this," he said, his back still to her. "Drink during work hours, but then again, I don't normally..." He trailed off, shook his head. "Would you like some coffee, tea?" "I'm fine, thank you." He finally turned to face her, leaning against his desk, up close. She could see the gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and old grief. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said. "About what you told me, the dates." Hannah's heart started hammering. "Sir, Let me finish." His voice wasn't harsh, just firm, controlled, like he'd practiced this speech 100 times in his head. "I've spent 18 years looking for my daughter. 18 years chasing ghosts, following leads that went nowhere, paying investigators who found nothing, private detectives, FBI consultants, even a psychic once when I was desperate enough to believe in that nonsense." He laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Hannah shook her head. "The not knowing, the wondering if she's out there somewhere. Alive, thinking I abandoned her, or worse, thinking she's..." He couldn't finish that sentence. Didn't need to. "Mr. Miller," Hannah said softly, "why are you telling me this?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Hannah felt like he was seeing straight through to her bones. "Because you have her eyes," he said. "Claire's eyes, and that dimple." His voice cracked. Lily had that same dimple, right there. He touched his own chin. "I thought I was losing my mind when I first saw you. Thought grief was finally catching up with me after all these years. But then you told me about Nevada, about the date, and I started thinking, what if?" Hannah couldn't breathe. What if what? What if the impossible is actually possible? The words hung in the air between them like a prayer. Robert pushed off from the desk and walked to the window. Lily loved it up here. She'd press her nose against the glass and count the boats in the bay. She was always singing, drove the staff crazy sometimes. But Claire and I, he smiled at the memory, We thought it was the most beautiful sound in the world. What did she sing? Hannah asked, even though part of her already knew the answer. Everything. Disney songs, nursery rhymes. But her favorite, the one Claire made up for her, was about a bird. He turned back to face her. A little bird that got lost but found its way home. The room tilted. Hannah gripped the arms of the chair. "Fly, fly, little bird," Robert said softly, and his eyes were shining with unshed tears. That's how it started. Claire sang it every night at bedtime. By the end, Lily knew all the words by heart. Hannah's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Fly home. Fly to the nest. The wind may blow. The rain may fall. But you'll find your way back. Safe and blessed." The whiskey glass slipped from Robert's hand. It hit the carpet with a dull thud, amber liquid spreading across the expensive fabric. He didn't seem to notice. "How do you know that?" His voice was hoarse. "How do you know those words?" "I don't know." Hannah's own eyes were burning now. "I've always known them. For as long as I can remember, I thought it was just something I heard somewhere. But I've never been able to find it anywhere. Not in any song, not in any book. It's always been there." Robert crossed the room in 3 long strides. He knelt in front of her chair, and Hannah saw that his hands were shaking. "Claire made up that song," he said. "She never wrote it down, never sang it to anyone but Lily. It was theirs, their special thing." He searched her face desperately. "So tell me, how does a girl who was found in Nevada with no memories, a girl who grew up in an orphanage 300 miles away, know a lullaby that only 2 people in the world should have known?" Hannah couldn't answer, couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. "I need to know," Robert said. "I need to know if you're her, if you're my Lily." "I don't know if I am," Hannah managed. "I want to be God. I want to be so badly it hurts. But what if I'm not? What if it's just a coincidence? What if there are too many coincidences?" Robert stood up, ran a hand through his hair. "The date, the location, the song, your eyes, that dimple. The fact that you just appeared here, in my restaurant, after 18 years. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "We need proof. Real proof." "How?" "DNA test." He was already dialing. "I'll have my doctor come here tonight. We can have results in a week. Maybe less if I pay for the rush." Hannah's mind was racing. A DNA test. That would settle it. Once and for all. She'd know if she was Hannah the orphan, or Lily the lost daughter, if she had a father, or if she was still alone in the world. "Okay," she said. "Yes, let's do it." Robert lowered the phone. "You're sure, once we know—" "I need to know," Hannah interrupted. "I've spent 18 years wondering who I am, where I came from, why no one wanted me." Her voice broke. "If there's even a chance that someone did want me, that someone spent 18 years looking for me, I need to know." Robert nodded. He finished dialing, stepped away to speak in low tones. Hannah heard fragments. "Tonight. Priority. Whatever it costs." When he hung up, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe, mixed with terror. "Dr. Chen will be here in an hour," he said. "Hannah." He stopped, corrected himself. "I don't even know what to call you." "Hannah's fine. It's the only name I've ever known." "Right, Hannah." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "While we wait, would you tell me about your life? About growing up in Nevada?" So she did. She told him about St. Joseph's, about Sister Margaret who was kind but overwhelmed, about aging out of the system at 18 with nothing but a GED and a bus ticket to San Francisco. She told him about the crappy apartments, the endless string of minimum wage jobs, the loneliness that felt like a permanent ache in her chest. And Robert listened to every word like it mattered, like she mattered, when Dr. Chen arrived with his medical bag and official forms. Hannah rolled up her sleeve without hesitation. The needle pinch was nothing. She'd felt worse. Robert gave his sample next, and then it was done. A week of waiting stretched ahead of them like an eternity. As Hannah was leaving, Robert called her name. "Whatever the results say," he told her, "thank you for being brave enough to do this, for being willing to find out." Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. She took the elevator down in a daze, past the kitchen where Nancy gave her a knowing look, past the dining room where the evening crowd was starting to filter in, out into the San Francisco twilight where the fog was rolling in off the bay like a blanket. 1 week, 7 days to find out if she was going to find her family or lose them all over again. The envelope sat on Robert's desk like a loaded gun. 7 days had crawled by like 7 years. Hannah had barely slept, barely eaten. She'd gone through the motions at work, taking orders, serving food, clearing tables, but her mind was always somewhere else. Waiting, wondering, hoping and terrified in equal measure. Robert had called her that morning. His voice on the phone had been tight, controlled. "The results are here. Can you come to the house today?" The house, not the office, not the restaurant. The house. Now Hannah stood in front of a mansion in Pacific Heights that looked like it belonged in a magazine. 3 stories of pristine white stone, bay windows that reflected the afternoon sun, a garden that probably cost more to maintain than she made in a year. A black iron gate separated her from answers. She pressed the buzzer. "Come in, Hannah." Robert's voice crackled through the intercom. The gate swung open with a smooth, expensive click. Hannah walked up the stone path on legs that felt like water. The front door opened before she could knock. Robert stood there in jeans and a sweater, the most casual she'd ever seen him. He looked like he'd aged a decade in a week. "Thanks for coming," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The interior was beautiful and sad at the same time. High ceilings, expensive art on the walls, furniture that screamed money, but it felt empty, like a museum nobody visited anymore. This way, Robert led her through a living room with a fireplace big enough to stand in, past a kitchen that could have served a small army, and into what looked like a study, dark wood everywhere, books lining the walls. And there, on the desk, the envelope. Hannah's mouth went dry. "Would you like something to drink?" Robert asked. "Coffee, water?" "I'm okay." She wasn't, but her throat felt too tight to swallow anyway. Robert sat down behind the desk. Hannah took the chair across from him, the same position they'd been in a week ago, but everything was different now. Everything hung on what was inside that envelope. "I haven't opened it yet," Robert said quietly. I thought we should do this together." Hannah nodded. She couldn't find words. Robert reached for the envelope. His hand was shaking. He tore it open, too fast, like ripping off a Band-Aid, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the page. Then he stopped breathing. Hannah watched the color drain from his face, watched his eyes fill with tears, watched his hand come up to cover his mouth like he was trying to hold back a sound that would break him. "Mr. Miller." Her voice cracked. "What does it say?" He looked up at her, and Hannah saw something she'd never seen in anyone's eyes before. Pure, overwhelming joy mixed with devastating grief. "It's you," he whispered. "You're Lily. You're my daughter." The world stopped spinning. Hannah heard the words, understood them, but they didn't feel real, couldn't be real. She was Hannah. She'd always been Hannah, the orphan, the girl nobody wanted, the one who grew up without a family, without a past, without... "I'm sorry," she heard herself say. "I'm sorry, I can't..." And then she was crying. Huge, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in her chest, from a place she didn't know existed. 18 years of loneliness, of wondering, of aching for something she couldn't name. It all came pouring out. Robert was around the desk in seconds. He knelt in front of her chair, and for a moment he just hovered there, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch her. Then Hannah fell forward, and his arms came around her, and she cried into his shoulder like she was 5 years old again. "I looked for you," he said, his voice breaking. "Every day, every single day. I never stopped. I swear to God, Lily, I never stopped looking. I didn't know," Hannah sobbed. "I didn't know anyone was looking. I thought I didn't matter, that I wasn't wanted." "You were wanted." Robert pulled back, just enough to look at her face, his hands on her shoulders. "You were so wanted. You have no idea how much. Your mother loved you. I loved you. We loved you so much." Hannah couldn't stop crying. 18 years of tears that needed to come out. They stayed like that for a long time. Minutes, maybe hours. Hannah wasn't sure. Eventually the sobs quieted to hiccups, and she pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Sorry. she mumbled. "I got your sweater all wet." "I don't care." Robert handed her a box of tissues from the desk. "I don't care about anything except that you're here, that I found you, that you're safe." Hannah blew her nose, trying to pull herself together. "What happens now?" "Whatever you want." Robert sat back on his heels. "This is a lot. I know it's a lot. We can take it slow. We can I see it?" Hannah interrupted. "My room. Nancy said you kept it." Something flickered across Robert's face. Pain, maybe, or fear. "Are you sure?" "It's exactly how it was. I haven't changed anything." "I'm sure." Robert stood slowly, like his legs weren't quite steady. "Okay, it's upstairs." Hannah followed him up a curved staircase with a banister. She wanted to slide down like a kid, down a hallway lined with photographs. Robert, and a beautiful woman with dark hair and a smile that lit up the room. Claire, Hannah's mother, a woman she couldn't remember but who'd sung her to sleep every night. Robert stopped in front of a white door. His hand rested on the handle, but he didn't turn it right away. "I come in here every morning," he said quietly. "Put fresh flowers on her dresser. Tell her good morning, even though she's not there. Your mother used to say I was crazy, talking to an empty room, but I couldn't stop. It was the only way I could." He stopped, cleared his throat. "The only way I could feel like I was still your father." He opened the door. The room was frozen in time. A small white bed with a pink comforter covered in butterflies. Stuffed animals arranged carefully on the pillows. A bookshelf full of picture books. Drawings taped to the walls. Stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. A child's desk with crayons still scattered on top, and on the dresser, just like Robert said, a vase of fresh white flowers next to a silver-framed photo. Claire holding a little girl, both of them laughing at something off-camera. Hannah walked in slowly, like she was entering a church. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She touched the bed, the books, the drawings, trying to remember, trying to feel something. Nothing came. "I don't remember any of this," she said, and hated how lost she sounded. "I want to, but I don't. It's like looking at someone else's life." "That's okay." Robert stood in the doorway. "The doctor said, after the accident, they said you might never remember. Trauma does that to kids. The brain protects itself by forgetting." Hannah picked up a stuffed rabbit from the bed. It was worn, one ear slightly crooked. "Did I have a favorite?" "That one." Robert pointed at the rabbit. "Mr. Hoppy. You took him everywhere. Your mother had to sneak him into the wash while you were sleeping." Hannah held the rabbit close, breathing in the old fabric smell, somewhere deep in her mind. Something stirred. Not a memory exactly, but a feeling. Safe. Loved. Home. "Can I stay here tonight?" The words came out before she could think about them. "In this room." Robert's expression crumbled. "You can stay here forever if you want. This is your home, Lily. It always was." "Hannah," she said. "I'm still Hannah. I don't know how to be Lily yet." "Then be Hannah." Robert smiled through his tears. "Be whoever you need to be. We'll figure out the rest together." That night, Hannah, Lily, whoever she was, lay in the small white bed that smelled like lavender and held Mr. Hoppy close to her chest. Robert had left her alone after making sure she had everything she needed, but she could hear him moving around downstairs, could hear the TV on low, like he couldn't stand the silence. She stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and thought about how her entire life had just changed. Yesterday she was nobody, an orphan, a girl serving coffee to rich people and sleeping in a studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling. Today she was somebody's daughter. She had a father who'd been looking for her for 18 years. She had a mother who'd loved her enough to make up lullabies. She had a home. Hannah rolled over and looked at the photo on the dresser. Claire's smile. The little girl's laugh. "Hi, Mom," she whispered to the darkness. "I'm sorry I don't remember you, but I promise I'm going to try." Outside, the fog rolled in off the bay, wrapping the mansion in white, and for the first time in 18 years, Hannah fell asleep feeling like she belonged somewhere. Catherine Blake had built her empire on knowing things before anyone else did. She'd known Robert Miller would be successful before he did. She'd known exactly when to invest, when to expand, when to pivot. She'd known how to smile at the right people, say the right things, position herself as indispensable. And she'd known, 18 years ago, that a 5-year-old girl would destroy everything she'd worked for. Now, sitting in her corner office 3 blocks from Robert's restaurant, Catherine stared at the investigator's report on her desk and felt that old, familiar panic clawing at her throat. DNA test confirmed. Hannah Wells is Lily Ann Miller, 99.9% probability. The investigator had cost her $10,000, money well spent, considering what was at stake. Everything. That's what was at stake. Everything. Catherine picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd sworn she'd never use again. "It's me," she said when the line connected. "We have a problem." Hannah woke up in her childhood bedroom, though it didn't feel like hers yet, to the smell of pancakes. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw Mr. Hoppy on the pillow next to her, saw the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and remembered. She was Lily Miller. She had a father. She had a home. The thought still felt surreal. She pulled on the clothes she'd worn yesterday. Robert had offered to take her shopping. But that felt like too much too soon, and headed downstairs. Following the smell, Robert stood at the stove, spatula in hand, looking completely out of place in his expensive kitchen. There were pancakes everywhere, on plates, on the counter, one on the floor that he apparently hadn't noticed. "I wasn't sure how you liked them," he said when he saw her, looking embarrassed. "So I made several variations, some with chocolate chips, some with blueberries, some plain, and I think I burned a few." He gestured helplessly at the mess. "I haven't cooked breakfast in 18 years. Something warm bloomed in Hannah's chest. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." Robert set down the spatula. "Your mother used to make pancakes every Sunday. She'd let you crack the eggs, even though you got shells everywhere. I thought maybe." He trailed off. "I thought maybe it would feel like home." Hannah picked up a chocolate chip pancake. "It does." They ate at the kitchen island, mostly in comfortable silence. Robert kept glancing at her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he looked away too long. Hannah understood. She felt the same way about him. "I called my lawyer this morning," Robert said, pouring more coffee. "We need to update your legal documents, birth certificate, social security, all of it. You're legally Lily Miller now, not Hannah Wells." The name still felt wrong in her mouth. "Can I still use Hannah? At work? I mean, of course. Whatever makes you comfortable." Robert paused. "Actually, about work, you don't have to keep waitressing. You're my daughter, I want to keep working." Hannah said it firmly. "I need normal right now. Does that make sense?" "It does." Robert smiled. "You're stronger than I was at your age. Stronger than I am now, probably." Hannah showed up for her shift that afternoon, feeling like she was walking into a different world. Because she was, in a way. Yesterday she'd been Hannah the waitress. Today she was Lily Miller, secret daughter of the owner, except nobody knew that yet. Nancy cornered her in the break room before service started. "Well," the older woman's eyes were sharp. "Don't keep me in suspense, girl. What happened?" Hannah couldn't help but smile. "It's me. I'm his daughter." Nancy's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, honey. Oh, Hannah. Or should I call you Lily now?" "Hannah's fine. I'm still getting used to everything." Nancy pulled her into a fierce hug that smelled like onions and jasmine. "I knew it. The second I saw you, something in my gut said you were special, that you belonged here." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Your mama would be so happy. She'd be so damn happy." Hannah felt her own eyes sting. "I wish I remembered her. Maybe that's a blessing, the accident." Nancy shook her head. "Some things are better forgotten." The shift was busy. Hannah fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, carrying plates, refilling drinks. It felt good to have something to focus on besides the chaos in her head. She didn't notice Catherine Blake until the woman was right in front of her. "Hannah, isn't it?" Catherine's smile was perfect, too perfect, like something carved from ice. Hannah had seen Catherine around before. Hard not to notice her. She was always impeccably dressed, always commanding attention, always at Robert's side during business meetings. Robert's business partner, his right hand for the past 20 years. "Yes, ma'am. Can I get you something?" "Just water, please, and tell me..." Catherine tilted her head. "How are you finding the job?" Robert can be demanding, "I hope he's treating you well." Something in her tone made Hannah's skin prickle. "He's been very kind." "Has he?" Catherine's smile widened. "That's good. That's very good, you know. I've known Robert for a very long time. Since before everything. He's a complicated man, wounded. Sometimes he sees things that aren't there. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Hannah didn't, but she nodded anyway. "Good girl." Catherine stood, smoothing her designer skirt. "Just remember, not everything that glitters is gold. Sometimes it's just broken glass that catches the light." She walked away, leaving Hannah with a cold feeling in her stomach. Nancy found her 20 minutes later, looking pale. "Catherine just asked me about you," she said, keeping her voice low. "Wanted to know how long you'd been here, where you came from, if you'd talked to Robert much." Nancy gripped Hannah's arm. She's never asked about staff before. Never. Why would she care? Because Catherine knows things. Nancy glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "She's got eyes and ears everywhere. If Robert did that DNA test, if he told anyone, lawyers, doctors, she could have found out. And if she knows you're Lily, what? What would she do?" Nancy's expression was grim. "Protect herself. Catherine's been second in command here for 20 years. But you're the heir, the real one. Blood, that makes you a threat to everything she's built." Hannah's mouth went dry. "You think she'd hurt me?" "I think Catherine Blake doesn't let anything stand in her way. Never has." Nancy squeezed her arm harder. "Be careful, honey. Watch your back." That night, Hannah told Robert about the conversation with Catherine. They were in his study. Hannah curled up in an armchair while Robert paced. "She shouldn't even know about you yet," he said, anger tight in his voice. "I haven't told anyone except my lawyer, and he's bound by confidentiality. Maybe she's just suspicious. Maybe she doesn't actually know. Maybe." But Robert didn't look convinced. He stopped pacing and looked at Hannah. "I'm going to be honest with you. Catherine and I built this business together. She's been my partner for 20 years, but..." He hesitated. "She's always been ambitious. Sometimes too ambitious. I've had to rein her in more than once." "You think she'd hurt me?" Hannah asked quietly. "I think I don't know anymore." Robert ran a hand through his hair. "I thought I knew her. But if she's willing to spy on us, to investigate you behind my back, I'm going to make some calls, put some security measures in place." "Dad," the word slipped out before Hannah could stop it. They both froze. "You called me Dad," Robert said, his voice rough with emotion. Hannah felt her cheeks heat. "Sorry. I didn't mean..." "Don't apologize. Please don't apologize. I've been waiting 18 years to hear that word again." He crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, just like he had when the DNA results came. "You can call me whatever you want, Robert. Mr. Miller, Dad. Whatever feels right. But hearing you say that..." He had to stop, clear his throat. "That was the best thing anyone said to me in 18 years. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "It felt right, saying it. Then say it whenever you want." Robert squeezed her hand. "And I promise you, I will not let anything happen to you. Not again. Not ever." But that night, after Hannah had gone to bed, Robert sat in his study with a glass of whiskey and made a different kind of call. "I need you to investigate Catherine Blake," he told his head of security. "Everything. Financial records, phone logs, emails. If she's done anything, and I mean anything, that puts my daughter at risk, I want to know about it. How deep do you want me to go?" "Sir," Robert thought about the woman who'd been his partner for 20 years, the woman who'd helped him build an empire, the woman who'd stood beside him at Claire's funeral and told him everything would be okay. "All the way back," he said. "Start with 18 years ago. The accident. I want to know where Catherine was, what she was doing, who she talked to, everything. That's going to take some time. Then you'd better start now." Robert hung up and stared at the photo of Claire and Lily on his desk. His girls. One gone forever. One miraculously returned. And if Catherine Blake had anything to do with why they'd been separated for 18 years, he'd make sure she paid for every single day. Hannah was getting used to the mansion, to waking up in a room that was supposed to be hers but still felt like a museum, to Robert making coffee too strong in the mornings, to the way he'd look at her sometimes like he was making sure she was real. 3 weeks had passed since the DNA results. 3 weeks of trying to figure out how to be a daughter when you'd spent 18 years being nobody's anything. Robert had been patient. Too patient, maybe. He never pushed, never demanded, just waited for her to come to him, to ask questions, to slowly let him in. They'd fallen into a routine. Breakfast together, Hannah working her shifts at the restaurant, dinners where they'd talk about everything and nothing. It was nice, almost normal. Hannah should have known it wouldn't last. It was a Tuesday night, late. Hannah had worked the dinner shift and stayed after to help Nancy prep for the next day. Robert had offered to send a car, but she'd insisted on taking the bus. She needed the independence, the reminder that she could still take care of herself. The bus stop was 3 blocks from the mansion, on a street that was usually busy but had emptied out after 10. Hannah walked with her headphones in, scrolling through her phone, not paying attention. That's when she heard the engine. A car, accelerating fast, too fast for a residential street. Hannah looked up just in time to see headlights bearing down on her. No time to think, just instinct. She threw herself sideways, hit the sidewalk hard, felt her knee crack against concrete. The car roared past. So close she felt the wind. It didn't slow down, didn't stop, just kept going. Taillights disappearing around the corner. Hannah lay there for a moment, heart hammering, trying to process what just happened. Her knee was bleeding through her jeans. Her palms were scraped raw, but she was alive. Someone had just tried to kill her. Robert's face went white when he opened the door and saw her, blood on her jeans, tears streaking her face, shaking so hard she could barely stand. Jesus Christ. Hannah, what happened? A car. Her voice came out broken. They tried to... It came right at me. Robert pulled her inside, guided her to the couch. His hands were shaking as he examined her knee, her palms. We need to call the police. We need to... It was deliberate. Hannah looked up at him. They were waiting. They knew I'd be there. Robert's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone, but he didn't call the police. He called someone else. It happened, he said when the line connected. Get over here now. 15 minutes later, a man in a dark suit arrived. Marcus Hayes, Robert's head of security. He was ex-military, built like a tank, with eyes that missed nothing. Hannah told him everything while Robert paced behind the couch like a caged animal. The car, the timing, the fact that it didn't stop or swerve, that it came straight for her. Did you see the driver? Marcus asked. No, the windows were tinted, but it was a black sedan, maybe a BMW. Marcus nodded, making notes on his phone. I'll check traffic cameras in the area. See if we can get a plate. And in the meantime, Robert's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. In the meantime, my daughter is a target. In the meantime, she doesn't go anywhere alone. Marcus looked at Hannah. Starting now, you have a security detail. Someone with you 24/7. That's insane. It's necessary. Robert knelt in front of her. Hannah, someone just tried to kill you. I'm not taking any chances, not with your life. Hannah wanted to argue. Wanted to say she didn't need a babysitter, that she'd been taking care of herself for 18 years. But her knee was throbbing. Her hands were still shaking, and she couldn't get the image of those headlights out of her head. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the car, felt the impact that almost was, heard the engine roaring. At 2 a.m., she gave up and went downstairs. Robert was in his study, still dressed, staring at his computer screen. Can't sleep either, he asked when she appeared in the doorway. Hannah shook her head and settled into the chair across from his desk. What are you doing? Looking for answers. Robert turned the screen toward her. It showed a series of bank transactions, highlighted in yellow. Marcus found something. Payments from Catherine's account to a man named Derek Torres. Multiple payments over the past month. Always in cash. Always for amounts just under $10,000. Who's Derek Torres? That's the question. Robert pulled up another window. He's got a record, assault, battery, suspected involvement in a hit-and-run 3 years ago that was never proven. He's exactly the kind of person you'd hire if you wanted something done and didn't care how. Hannah felt cold. You think Catherine paid him to? I think Catherine is scared. Robert closed the laptop. I think she knows what's at stake. That you're the legitimate heir. That your existence threatens everything she's built. And I think she's willing to do whatever it takes to protect herself. Even murder. I don't know. Robert's voice was heavy. I've known Catherine for 20 years, worked with her, trusted her, built an empire with her. I thought I knew what she was capable of. He looked at Hannah. But maybe I never really knew her at all. What are we going to do? We're going to keep you safe and we're going to find proof. Robert stood, came around the desk. Marcus is still digging. He's looking into Catherine's activities from 18 years ago, the night of the accident. If she was involved then, if she's the reason you disappeared, you'll what? Turn her into the police. Damn right I will. Robert's eyes were hard. She took 18 years from us, Hannah. 18 years we can never get back. If she thinks I'm going to let that go, she doesn't know me at all. The next morning, Hannah woke up to find Marcus's team already in place. 2 guards outside her door, another 2 patrolling the grounds, a driver waiting to take her anywhere she needed to go. It felt like being in prison, a luxurious prison. But still, Robert noticed her discomfort over breakfast. I know this is hard, the security, the restrictions, but it's temporary. How temporary? Until we figure this out, until Catherine is dealt with. He set down his coffee cup. I'm meeting with my lawyers this afternoon. We're going to start the process of removing her from the company. It'll take time. She owns 30%. She's on the board, but we'll find a way. And what if she does something else before then? Hannah pushed her eggs around her plate. What if next time? There won't be a next time. Robert's voice was firm. I promise you, Hannah. I failed to protect you once. I won't make that mistake again. But Catherine Blake wasn't done. That afternoon, while Hannah was at the restaurant under Marcus's watchful eye, rumors started spreading, whispered conversations in corners, glances in her direction. Nancy pulled her into the walk-in freezer where they could talk privately. Catherine's making her move, Nancy said, her breath visible in the cold air. She's telling people you're a fraud, that you manipulated the DNA test, that you're just a gold digger who seduced a lonely old man. Hannah felt sick. I know it's not true. But Catherine's been here 20 years. People trust her. And you. Nancy's expression was sympathetic. You're new, an outsider. They don't know you yet. What do I do? You hold your head up and do your job. Let Robert handle Catherine. Nancy squeezed her shoulder. The truth always comes out, honey. Always. But as Hannah went back to work, feeling eyes on her from every direction, she wasn't so sure. Catherine had money, power, connections. What did Hannah have? A DNA test and a father who'd only just found her. It didn't feel like enough. That night, Robert came home late from his lawyer meeting looking exhausted. It's going to be harder than I thought, he admitted. Catherine's dug in. She's threatening legal action if we try to force her out. Says she'll tie us up in court for years. Hannah felt her last bit of hope crumble. So she wins? She tried to kill me and she just gets away with it. No. Robert's voice was steel. She doesn't get away with it. We just need to be smarter, patient. He pulled out his phone and showed her a message from Marcus. But look at this. Traffic camera footage from the night of the attack. We got a partial plate. Marcus is running it now. And if it leads back to her, then we have proof. Real, concrete proof. And Catherine can threaten all the lawsuits she wants. They won't mean anything when she's in jail. Hannah wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that justice would win. That the bad guys always lost in the end. But she'd spent 18 years in the system. She knew better than most that the world wasn't fair. Sometimes the bad guys won. Sometimes they got away with everything. And as she lay in bed that night, knee still aching, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Marcus showed up at the mansion 3 days later with a manila envelope that looked like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Hannah and Robert were having breakfast, or trying to. Neither of them had much appetite these days. The security detail had become routine, but the fear hadn't gone away. Every car that drove by too slowly, every person who looked at Hannah too long, it all felt like a threat now. I've got something, Marcus said. Declining Robert's offer of coffee, he laid the envelope on the kitchen table like it might explode. You're going to want to sit down for this. Robert was already sitting. Hannah wasn't sure she could stand anyway. Marcus pulled out a stack of documents. Bank statements, phone records, old newspaper clippings. I went back 18 years like you asked. Started with the night of the accident, March 14th, 2007. Hannah's hands gripped the edge of the table. Catherine Blake made 3 phone calls that night. Marcus continued. All to a burner phone. The calls lasted less than 2 minutes each. Short, probably giving instructions. He pulled out a highlighted phone record. The burner was purchased 2 weeks earlier at a convenience store in Oakland. Paid for in cash, no ID required. That doesn't prove anything, Hannah said, though her heart was pounding. She could have been calling anyone. True, but then I found this. Marcus laid out another document, a bank statement from March 2007. 3 days before the accident, Catherine withdrew $50,000 from a private account. Cash withdrawal, no paper trail for what she did with it. Robert's face had gone pale. $50,000. Gets better. Marcus wasn't smiling. Or worse. Depending on how you look at it, I tracked down the driver of the truck that hit your wife's car. Guy named Jimmy Russo. He was convicted of vehicular manslaughter. Served 8 years. Got out on parole in 2015. I remember him. Robert's voice was rough. They said he was drunk. Blood alcohol level twice the legal limit. He was drunk, Marcus confirmed. But here's the thing. Russo had $40,000 deposited into his account 2 days before the accident. His lawyer at the time said it was from a settlement from a previous car accident. But I checked. There was no settlement. No previous accident. The money just appeared. Hannah felt sick. She paid him. Catherine paid him to cause the accident. That's my theory. Marcus pulled out more papers. But wait, there's more. Right after the accident, while you were still in the hospital, Catherine made another cash withdrawal, $25,000, and 3 days later, the day you disappeared, Lily, a woman matching Catherine's description was seen at a gas station just outside Reno, Nevada. Security footage is long gone, but the station manager remembers because she paid for gas with $100 bills. Said it was unusual. Robert stood up so fast his chair fell over. She took my daughter. She paid someone to crash into Claire's car, and then she took my daughter and dumped her in Nevada like... His voice broke. Hannah had never seen him this close to losing control. There's more, Marcus said quietly. I found the woman Catherine hired to take Lily to Nevada. Took some work, but I tracked her down. Name's Linda Morrison. She's living in Oregon now, working at a grocery store. And when I showed up asking questions, he paused. Let's just say she was very willing to talk. She's been carrying the guilt for 18 years. She confessed. Hannah could barely breathe. On tape, Marcus pulled out a small recording device. She said Catherine approached her at a bar, offered her $10,000 to take a little girl to Nevada and leave her somewhere she'd be found. Told her the kid was in danger from an abusive father, that she was helping. Linda believed it at the time, or convinced herself she did because the money was good. But over the years, he looked at Hannah. She's haunted by what she did. When I told her you'd been found, that you'd been in foster care all these years, she broke down. Robert braced himself against the counter, his knuckles white. Do we have enough for the police? We have circumstantial evidence, the money trail, the phone records, Linda's confession. Marcus gathered the papers. It's not airtight, but combined with the recent attempt on Hannah's life, the car that tried to hit her was registered to a shell company that traces back to one of Catherine's accounts. We got that this morning. That's enough. Robert's voice was deadly calm now, the kind of calm that came before a storm. That's more than enough. We're taking this to the police. We're taking this to the DA, and I'm going to watch Catherine Blake burn for what she did. But Catherine Blake wasn't stupid. While Marcus was gathering evidence, Catherine was making moves of her own. By the time Robert called his lawyer to arrange a meeting with the district attorney, Catherine had already filed a lawsuit against Hannah. The papers were delivered that afternoon by a process server who looked apologetic. Hannah stood in the mansion's foyer, staring at the legal documents that accused her of fraud, emotional manipulation, and conspiracy to defraud Robert Miller of his fortune. She's claiming I'm not really Lily, Hannah said numbly. She's saying I manipulated the DNA test somehow. That I'm working with someone to con you out of money. Robert snatched the papers from her hands, read them, and threw them across the room. This is desperate. This is a desperate woman trying to muddy the waters before we can expose her. But what if it works? Hannah's voice rose. What if people believe her? What if... They won't. Robert pulled her into a hug. They won't, because we have the truth. We have proof. And Catherine? He pulled back to look at her. Catherine has lies, and lies always fall apart eventually. The next day, Robert called a meeting, not with Catherine. She wasn't invited, with the board of directors, the company's major investors, and his legal team. Hannah wanted to go, but Robert insisted she stay home with Marcus and the security detail. "This is going to get ugly," he said. "I need to know you're safe." So Hannah waited. She paced the mansion's living room for 3 hours, checking her phone every 5 minutes, driving Marcus crazy with her anxiety. When Robert finally came home, he looked exhausted but triumphant. "I told them everything," he said, collapsing onto the couch. "Showed them all the evidence Marcus gathered, the money trail, the phone records, Linda Morrison's confession. I told them about the attempt on your life. I told them that Catherine Blake orchestrated the accident that killed my wife and stole my daughter." How did they react? Shock. Disbelief at first. But the evidence? Robert shook his head. The evidence speaks for itself. The board voted unanimously to suspend Catherine pending a criminal investigation. She's been removed from all operations effective immediately. Security escorted her out of the building an hour ago. Hannah felt her knees go weak. "It's over." "Not yet. She can still fight this legally. And we still need the DA to press charges." Robert took her hand. "But we're close, Hannah. We're so close to getting justice for what she did." That night, Hannah couldn't sleep again. She kept thinking about Catherine, about how someone could live with that kind of guilt for 18 years, how she could look Robert in the eye every day knowing what she'd done. She went down to the kitchen for water and found Robert there, sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Robert said. "Catherine was always ambitious, always pushing for more, but I thought we were partners, friends even. I trusted her with everything." Hannah sat down next to him. "She fooled everyone. That's what con artists do. They make you believe they're something they're not. I should have seen it. After the accident, she was the one who convinced me to stop looking for you. Said I needed to move on, that holding on to hope was destroying me. I thought she was trying to help." Robert's laugh was bitter. "She was just trying to make sure you'd never be found. But I was found." Hannah squeezed his hand. "Despite everything she did, despite 18 years of lies, I found my way home, just like the song said I would." Robert looked at her, eyes shining. "Fly, fly, little bird. Fly home to the nest," Hannah finished. They sat there in the dark kitchen, father and daughter, finally together after 18 years of being apart. And for the first time since the car had tried to run her down, Hannah felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. But neither of them knew that Catherine Blake, sitting in her penthouse apartment surrounded by expensive things that suddenly felt meaningless, was making one final desperate call. "I don't care what it costs," she said into the phone. "I want them both gone. The girl and Miller. I want them gone. And I want it done before they can testify." The voice on the other end quoted a price. Catherine didn't even blink. "Done. But it has to look like an accident. Nothing that traces back to me." She hung up and poured herself a glass of wine. She'd built an empire. She wasn't going to lose it to some girl who got lucky, and a man who couldn't let go of the past. If Robert and Hannah thought this was over, they were dead wrong. In every sense of the word, the invitation arrived on cream-colored paper. Hand-delivered to the mansion by courier, Catherine Blake cordially invites Robert Miller and Hannah Miller to a private meeting at the Pacific Heights estate, Friday, 7 p.m., to discuss a peaceful resolution to recent misunderstandings. Hannah stared at the elegant script. She can't be serious. She's cornered. Robert set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Marcus, who'd been reviewing security footage in the corner, looked up. "It's a trap. Has to be. Of course it's a trap." Robert's voice was calm, but Hannah could see the tension in his shoulders. "The question is, do we walk into it anyway?" "Absolutely not." Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides. "You go to that meeting. You're giving her exactly what she wants, a chance to finish what she started. Or," Robert said slowly, "we give her exactly what we want, a chance to confess, on record." Hannah's stomach dropped. You want to wear a wire? I want to end this. Robert looked at her. The DA says we have enough for an arrest. But Catherine's lawyers are good. They'll tie this up for years if we let them. But if we can get her to confess, if we can get her to admit what she did on tape, he spread his hands. It's over. No trial, no legal battles, just justice. It's too dangerous, Marcus said flatly. She's already tried to kill Hannah once. You think she won't try again? Not if we control the environment. Robert turned to Marcus. You said you had contacts, people who could set up surveillance, provide backup without being seen. I do, but then set it up. We meet her on Friday. We wear wires. You and your team are positioned outside, ready to move in if anything goes wrong. Robert's jaw was set. I'm not letting Catherine walk away from this, and I'm not letting her threaten my daughter for one more day. Hannah wanted to argue, wanted to say it was insane, that they should just let the police handle it, but she'd seen how scared Catherine was. Scared people made mistakes, and maybe, just maybe, they could use that. I'm coming too, she said. Both men turned to stare at her. No, Robert's voice was firm. Absolutely not. She invited both of us. Hannah picked up the invitation. If I don't show, she'll know something's up. She'll be on guard. Hannah, I need to face her, Dad. The words still felt new on her tongue. But right, I need to look her in the eye and hear her admit what she did. To Mom, to us, to our family. Her voice cracked. I need closure. Robert looked at her for a long moment. Then he closed his eyes and nodded. Okay, but you stay behind me the entire time. At the first sign of trouble, you run, deal. Deal. Marcus looked like he wanted to throw something. You're both insane. You know that, right? Probably, Robert agreed. Get your team ready, Marcus. We've got 3 days. Those 3 days crawled by like years. Marcus brought in his people. Ex-military, ex-FBI. The kind of professionals who moved like shadows and saw everything. They surveyed Catherine's estate, mapped out entry points, identified escape routes. They set up long-range audio equipment and tiny cameras hidden in buttons and jewelry. Hannah practiced what she'd say, how she'd look Catherine in the eye without breaking down, how she'd stay calm when every cell in her body wanted to scream. Robert went over the plan obsessively. Every scenario, every possible outcome. What they'd do if Catherine confessed. What they'd do if she didn't. What they'd do if things went sideways. Nancy brought food that nobody ate and worried in the way only someone who'd watched you grow up could worry. And on Friday evening, as the sun started its descent over San Francisco Bay, Hannah and Robert got into the car that would take them to Catherine Blake's estate. Last chance to back out, Marcus said from the driver's seat. Not a chance, Robert replied. Hannah said nothing. Just checked the small recording device hidden in her necklace for the 10th time and tried to slow her racing heart. Catherine's estate was beautiful in that cold, perfect way that money could buy. All stone and glass and manicured gardens that looked like they'd been painted rather than grown. Catherine herself answered the door. She was dressed simply. Black slacks, white blouse. But she wore them like armor. Her smile was practiced, her eyes sharp. Robert, Hannah, thank you for coming. She stepped aside. Please come in. The interior was as cold as the exterior. Modern furniture. Abstract art. Everything white and chrome and sterile, like a showroom instead of a home. Catherine led them to a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. She'd already poured 3 glasses of wine. I won't drink that, Robert said flatly. Catherine's smile didn't falter. Of course, I forget. You've always been paranoid about poison. She picked up her own glass and took a sip. See, perfectly safe. Hannah remained standing even though Catherine gestured to the chairs. She could feel the recording device against her skin. Could imagine Marcus and his team outside with their long-range microphones. They weren't alone. They weren't alone. Let's skip the pleasantries, Robert said. You invited us here to discuss a resolution. I'm listening. Catherine set down her wine glass with deliberate care. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. I dropped my lawsuit against Hannah. I resigned from the company quietly. No fuss, no public statements. And in return, she looked directly at Robert. You let the past stay in the past. The past. Robert's voice was dangerously soft. You mean the part where you orchestrated my wife's murder and kidnapped my daughter? For just a second, Catherine's mask slipped. Hannah saw it. The flash of fear, quickly covered. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Because we have bank records showing you withdrew $75,000 in cash around the time of the accident. We have phone records showing you called a burner phone the night Claire died. We have a confession from Linda Morrison, the woman you paid to dump my 5-year-old daughter in the middle of nowhere. Robert took a step forward. We have everything. Catherine, every lie, every payment, every calculated move you made to destroy my family so you could keep your piece of the empire. Catherine's composure cracked further. You can't prove any of that. We can. We have. The DA is ready to file charges. Robert's eyes were hard. The only question is whether you go down fighting or whether you do the decent thing for once in your miserable life and confess. Confess. Catherine laughed, but it sounded brittle. To what? Ambition? Success? Doing what was necessary to protect what I built? You didn't build it. Hannah found her voice. It came out stronger than she expected. You stole it. You killed my mother and took me from my father so you could have what wasn't yours. Catherine turned to her, and the mask fell away completely. What was underneath was ugly, raw hate mixed with desperation. You don't understand, Catherine said. You were 5 years old, a child. You would have inherited half of everything. Robert would have spent his entire life protecting you, putting you first, making sure you had everything. And me, she laughed again. I would have been shoved aside. 20 years of work, of sacrifice, of building this empire from nothing. All of it would have meant nothing because you had the right last name. So you killed my mother. Hannah's voice shook. You paid a drunk to crash into her car and then you kidnapped me and left me in a place where no one would ever find me. I saved you. Catherine's voice rose. I could have had you killed too. It would have been easy. A child that young. So many ways for accidents to happen. But I didn't. I gave you a chance at a normal life, away from all of this. You gave me 18 years in foster care. Hannah felt tears on her cheeks. 18 years of wondering why I wasn't good enough, why nobody wanted me, why I didn't have a family. But you survived, and now you're here, playing the victim, ready to destroy me for doing what needed to be done. Catherine's composure was completely gone now. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes. I paid Russo to cause the accident. Yes. I had Linda take you to Nevada. Yes. I tried to have you killed when you came back because you're a threat to everything I've worked for. Is that what you wanted to hear? Are you satisfied? The room fell silent except for Catherine's heavy breathing. Robert's voice was barely above a whisper. Got it. Marcus's voice came through the earpiece Hannah was wearing. Every word we're moving in. Good. Robert looked at Catherine with something like pity. You're done. Catherine realized her mistake a second too late. Her eyes went wide as she saw the recording device at Hannah's throat, registered the tiny camera in Robert's tie pin. You set me up. No, Robert said calmly. You confessed. There's a difference. The sound of sirens filled the air. Police cars pulling up outside. Marcus had called them the moment Catherine started talking. Catherine lunged for the door, but it was too late. Officers were already coming through, reading her rights, putting handcuffs on wrists that had signed contracts and cut checks and destroyed lives. She was still screaming. About lawyers, about rights, about how they couldn't do this. When they led her away, Hannah stood there, shaking, as the room emptied. Robert's arm came around her shoulders, solid and real. It's over, he said softly. It's finally over. Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. Outside, red and blue lights painted the mansion in colors that meant justice, that meant endings, that meant, finally, she could start to heal. The trial was set for 6 weeks later, but it never made it to court. Catherine's lawyers tried everything. Motions to suppress, claims of entrapment, arguments that the confession was coerced. But the recording was clear. The evidence was overwhelming. And Linda Morrison's testimony, combined with the forensic accounting that showed every dollar Catherine had spent orchestrating the tragedy, left no room for doubt. 3 weeks after her arrest, Catherine Blake accepted a plea deal. 25 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and attempted murder. No possibility of parole for 15 years. The day the deal was signed, Hannah stood in the Dawes office with Robert and watched Catherine's lawyer deliver the news. It should have felt like victory, like closure, but all Hannah felt was tired. "It's not enough," she said quietly as they left the building. 25 years. Mom is dead. I lost 18 years, and she gets to live. She gets to live in a cage," Robert said, his hand on her shoulder, "knowing she lost everything, that the empire she destroyed our family for is gone, that history will remember her as a murderer and a thief." He stopped on the courthouse steps. "Justice isn't always about punishment, Hannah. Sometimes it's about truth, and now everyone knows the truth." Hannah wanted to believe him, but grief wasn't that simple. The media circus that followed was brutal. Headlines everywhere. Restaurant mogul's partner arrested for murder. Missing heiress found after 18 years. The woman who stole a child. Reporters camped outside the mansion. Camera crews followed Hannah to work. Everyone wanted the story, wanted the exclusive, wanted to hear from the girl who'd been lost and found. Robert hired a PR firm to handle it. They crafted statements, scheduled interviews, controlled the narrative. Hannah did one press conference, standing beside Robert, hands shaking, reading from prepared remarks about forgiveness and healing and moving forward. She didn't feel any of those things yet, but she said the words anyway, because that's what people wanted to hear. The restaurant became a tourist attraction overnight. People came to see where the drama had unfolded, to get a glimpse of Hannah Miller, to take selfies in front of the building where a woman had murdered for greed. Nancy hated it. "You're not a circus act," she'd mutter, shooing away customers who got too intrusive. "You're a person. They need to remember that." But people forgot. They always forgot. 1 month after Catherine's plea deal, Robert called a company-wide meeting. He stood in front of everyone. Managers, staff, investors, the people who'd built the business alongside him. And he looked older than Hannah had ever seen him. Tired, ready for something to end. "I built this company from nothing," he began. 23 years ago, I had a dream, and alone, and no idea what I was doing. I was lucky. I had good people, and I had a partner I trusted." He paused. That trust was misplaced. Catherine Blake nearly destroyed everything. Not just the business, but my family, my life. She took things from me that can never be replaced. The room was silent. "But she didn't break me, and she didn't break this." Robert gestured to the room. "This company, these restaurants, everything we've built. It's bigger than one person's greed. It's bigger than tragedy. It's about community, about bringing people together, about creating something that matters." He took a breath. "Which is why I'm stepping back." A murmur went through the crowd. "Not stepping down," Robert clarified, "but stepping back. I'm promoting several key managers to the executive team. We're restructuring to ensure no single person ever has the kind of unchecked power Catherine had. And I'm going to spend more time." He looked at Hannah. "Being a father, something I should have been doing all along." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "This company will go on," Robert continued. "Stronger than before, better than before, because we learned from our mistakes, and because we refuse to let one person's darkness define who we are." He smiled, though it was sad. "Thank you all for standing by us, for believing in something bigger than the headlines, for being family when we needed it most." The applause was thunderous. That night, Robert and Hannah sat in what had become their spot, the kitchen island at 2 a.m., when the house was quiet and the world felt manageable again. "You meant what you said?" Hannah asked. "About stepping back." "Every word." Robert poured coffee for both of them. "I spent 18 years drowning in work, because I couldn't face the grief, couldn't face the empty house, the silence, the memories. But now," he looked at her, "now I have a reason to come home. I have a daughter who needs me, who I need. I don't want you to give up everything for me." "I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters." Robert squeezed her hand. "For 18 years, I chose wrong. I chose isolation over connection, work over healing. I'm not making that mistake again." Hannah felt something break open in her chest. The grief she'd been holding back, the anger, the confusion, all of it came pouring out in tears she couldn't stop. Robert pulled her close, and she cried into his shoulder like she had the day the DNA results came back. Cried for the mother she'd never remember, for the childhood she'd lost, for all the years they'd been apart. But this time, the tears felt different. Not just sad, cleansing maybe, like washing away the last of the poison Catherine had left behind. "I miss her," Hannah said when she could speak again. "I don't remember her, but I miss her. Is that crazy?" "No." Robert's voice was rough. "You miss what you could have had, the life you should have lived, the mother who would have loved you every day." He pulled back to look at her. "But Hannah, you survived. You grew up strong and kind despite everything. Claire would have been so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I want to remember her. I want to remember something." Robert stood and pulled her up. "Come with me." He led her upstairs, past her childhood bedroom, to the room at the end of the hall. The master bedroom. He'd barely mentioned it before. Hannah had assumed it was his private space, off limits. But now he opened the door and turned on the light. The room was beautiful, in a way that felt lived in rather than designed. Soft colors, comfortable furniture, photos everywhere, and on the dresser, a wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. "Claire's things," Robert said quietly. "I couldn't get rid of them. Couldn't even open this box for years. But maybe," he picked it up, "maybe it's time." They sat on the bed together, and Robert opened the box. Inside were treasures: a pressed flower from their wedding, ticket stubs from movies, a napkin with a sketch Claire had drawn of 5-year-old Lily sleeping, letters Robert had written when he traveled for business, a small bottle of perfume, and at the bottom, a notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. Her journal, Robert said. She wrote in it every day, about life, about dreams, about you. He handed it to Hannah. "I think she'd want you to have it." Hannah opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting was neat, feminine, full of life. "Lily sang the bird song 17 times today. I've created a monster, but God, I love hearing her little voice. She's so happy, so full of light. I hope she stays this way forever. I hope the world never dims that brightness." Hannah read entry after entry, her mother's voice coming through the pages, describing a little girl who loved strawberries and hated naps, who danced in the rain and told elaborate stories to her stuffed animals, a little girl who'd been loved completely. "Thank you," Hannah whispered. "Thank you for keeping this, for keeping her alive." "She is alive," Robert said. "In you, every day. I see her in you. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking, the way you hum when you're nervous, the kindness in your eyes." He touched her face gently. "Claire isn't gone as long as you're here." They sat there for hours, reading entries, looking at photos, piecing together the life Hannah should have had. And slowly, something inside her started to heal. Not completely. Grief didn't work that way, but enough to breathe, enough to believe that maybe, someday, she'd be whole again. A week later, Robert made an announcement that shocked everyone. He was creating the Claire and Lily Miller Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to finding missing children and supporting foster youth aging out of the system, funded entirely by his personal fortune. "Catherine tried to bury my daughter," he said at the press conference. "She tried to erase her existence, to make sure no one ever found her. But Hannah survived. She found her way home. And now," his voice broke, "now we're going to make sure every lost child has that same chance. Every kid in foster care will know someone is looking for them, that someone cares, that they matter." Hannah stood beside him, no longer shaking, no longer afraid. This was her purpose. This was how she'd turn tragedy into something good. This was how she'd honor the mother she couldn't remember and the father who never stopped searching. This was how she'd fly home and bring others with her 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in early spring. Hannah woke up in her childhood bedroom and didn't feel like a stranger anymore. The room had changed. She'd repainted the walls a soft blue, replaced some of the childhood furniture with pieces that felt more her. But she'd kept the important things. Mr. Hoppy, the glow-in-the-dark stars, the drawings taped to the wall, reminders of who she'd been and who she was becoming. She could hear Robert downstairs, probably burning breakfast again. He'd gotten better at cooking, but better was relative. Last week he'd somehow managed to set off the smoke alarm while making toast. Hannah smiled and pulled on her robe. 6 months ago, She'd been sleeping in a studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling, wondering if she'd ever belong anywhere. Now she was waking up in a mansion, with a father who loved her, in a life that finally felt real, not perfect. Grief didn't disappear just because justice had been served. Some nights she still woke up gasping, dreaming about the car, about Catherine's cold eyes, about all the years she'd lost. Some days she looked at photos of Claire and felt the weight of everything she'd never have. No memories of her mother's voice. No childhood birthday parties. No first days of school with both parents waving goodbye. But she was healing. Slowly. Imperfectly. But healing. Downstairs, Robert was indeed burning something. Pancakes by the smell of it. "I had the heat too high," he said sheepishly when Hannah appeared. "But I made extras, so we're good. We're ordering takeout, aren't we? Probably." They ate the unburned pancakes at the kitchen island, their spot now, where all the important conversations happened, where they'd learned to be father and daughter again. "Big day," Robert said, pouring coffee. "You nervous?" "Terrified," Hannah admitted. Today was the official launch of the Claire and Lily Miller Foundation. They'd spent 3 months setting it up, hiring staff, establishing programs, creating partnerships with law enforcement and foster care agencies. And this afternoon, they were holding a press conference to announce it to the world. Hannah would be speaking, really speaking this time, not just reading prepared remarks, telling her story in her own words. "You'll be great," Robert said. "But if you want me to do it instead?" "No," Hannah squared her shoulders. "This is important. Kids who are lost need to hear from someone who understands, who's been there, who made it out." She took a breath. "I can do this. I know you can." Robert reached across and squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be so proud." Hannah looked at the photo on the counter. Claire, young and smiling, holding baby Lily. She'd brought it down from the master bedroom, kept it where she could see it every day. "I hope so," she said quietly. Nancy showed up an hour later with food. Real food, not Robert's attempts at cooking. She'd become a fixture at the mansion. The grandmother, neither of them had but both desperately needed. "Eat," she commanded, unpacking containers of dumplings and noodles. "You're too skinny, both of you. You think running a foundation on empty stomachs is going to work." "We're not running on empty," Robert protested. "I made pancakes." "You burned pancakes. I could smell it from the driveway." Nancy shook her head but was smiling. "Now eat before I force feed you like children." They ate together, the 3 of them, talking about nothing important. The weather, the restaurant's new menu, Nancy's grandson who'd just gotten into Berkeley. Normal conversation, family conversation. This was what Hannah had been missing all those years. Not just a father, but a family. People who cared whether she ate breakfast, who showed up when she needed them, who made bad jokes and burned pancakes and loved her anyway. The press conference was held at the Foundation's new headquarters, a renovated building in the Mission District that had once been a church. They'd kept the high ceilings and stained glass windows, but modernized everything else. Created spaces that felt hopeful rather than institutional. The room was packed, media, donors, foster care advocates, law enforcement officials. Everyone wanted to see Robert Miller's redemption story, wanted to witness the phoenix rising from ashes. But this wasn't about redemption. It was about prevention, about making sure what happened to Hannah never happened to another child. Robert spoke first, explaining the Foundation's mission, its programs, its goals. He was eloquent, passionate, the businessman, turned advocate. People listened, took notes, nodded along. Then it was Hannah's turn. She walked to the podium on shaking legs, looked out at all those faces, and almost ran. But then she saw Nancy in the 3rd row, giving her a thumbs up. Saw Marcus standing in the back, watching her with quiet pride. Saw Robert off to the side, looking at her like she'd hung the moon. She could do this. "My name is Hannah Miller," she began. "But for 18 years I was just Hannah. No last name that meant anything. No family, no history. I was a girl who appeared in Nevada one day with no memories. No past. Nothing." The room was silent. "I spent 18 years in foster care. Some homes were okay, some weren't. I aged out of the system at 18 with a GED and $300. I worked minimum wage jobs, lived in apartments I could barely afford. and wondered every single day why I wasn't enough, why nobody had wanted me, why I'd been left alone. Hannah's voice grew stronger, but I wasn't left alone. My father spent 18 years looking for me. He never stopped. He never gave up. And against all odds, I found my way back to him. She paused. I'm one of the lucky ones. I found my family, but there are thousands of kids out there who won't, who are still lost, who are still wondering why nobody's looking. She gripped the podium. This foundation is for them, for every kid who thinks they don't matter, for every child who's waiting for someone to care enough to find them, for every teenager aging out of foster care who needs to know that someone sees them, values them, believes they deserve better. Her eyes found Robert's. My mother used to sing me a song about a little bird that got lost but found its way home. For 18 years, I was that bird, lost in the storm, trying to find my way. But I made it. And now, her voice cracked, now I'm going to help other birds find their way home too. The applause was deafening. That evening, after the press conference, after the interviews, after all the noise and chaos, Hannah and Robert drove to Golden Gate Park. They walked in silence to a quiet spot overlooking the bay, where the sun was setting in shades of gold and pink. Robert pulled out a small wooden box. I've been holding on to this, he said, waiting for the right moment. Inside the box were two things: a locket with Claire's picture and a small envelope with Lily written on it in Claire's handwriting. She wrote this the week before the accident, Robert explained, his voice rough. I found it years later in her jewelry box. She'd wanted to give it to you on your 6th birthday. Hannah opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter. My dearest Lily, by the time you read this, you'll be 6 years old, a big girl, probably too old for mommy's silly songs and bedtime stories. But I hope you remember them anyway. I hope you remember that you are loved more than words can say. You are my sunshine, my song, my little bird who fills the house with joy. And no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, I want you to know. You can always fly home. The nest will always be here, waiting for you, love forever. Mommy Hannah read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she put on the locket and felt the weight of it against her heart. Her mother's picture, her mother's love, finally where it belonged. She knew, Hannah whispered. Somehow, she knew I'd need this. She knew she loved you, Robert said. And that love, that's what brought you home. That's what survived 18 years of darkness. Love doesn't die, Hannah. It just waits. They stood there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in colors that looked like hope. 1 year later, the Claire and Lily Miller Foundation had reunited 43 missing children with their families and placed over 200 foster youth in stable, supportive environments. Hannah ran the foundation's day-to-day operations. She'd discovered a talent for administration, for connecting with kids who'd been through what she had, for making sure no one fell through the cracks. Robert had finally learned to make pancakes without burning them. Most of the time, Nancy had officially retired from the restaurant to become the foundation's chief grandmother, a position she'd created herself that mostly involved feeding everyone and making sure they took breaks. And every Sunday, without fail, Hannah and Robert drove to the cemetery where Claire was buried. They'd bring fresh flowers, jasmine, her favorite, and tell her about their week, about the kids they'd helped, about the family they'd rebuilt, about how her love had brought her little bird home on this particular Sunday. As they stood by Claire's grave, Hannah noticed something, a nest in the tree overhead with tiny birds chirping. Look, she said, pointing. Baby birds, learning to fly. Robert smiled, just like their mother taught them. Hannah watched the birds for a long moment, then looked at her father. Thank you, she said, for never stopping, for believing I was out there, for waiting for me to come home. Always, Robert said simply, for however long it took, forever, if necessary. They walked back to the car hand in hand, father and daughter, no longer lost. The little bird had flown home, and in the nest she'd found, she'd finally learned to rest.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us. and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.